There is a feeling here. A link to the past, almost as though a moment has been captured in time. Long forgotten, perhaps, but somehow still present. Its story reaches far beyond this quiet valley, through tournaments, crusade, rebellion, and the courts of 5 English kings. And at the centre of that story was a man who rose from a landless knight to become the guardian of a kingdom. Long before Cartmel looked as it does today, this was a working religious settlement. Not simply a group of men shut away from the world in prayer, but a community connected to the people, the land, and the everyday life of the valley. People farmed here, traded goods, prepared food, tended animals, and dealt with all the ordinary difficulties of medieval life. There would have been conversation and disagreement, laughter and grief, work and worship. And at the centre of it all stood Cartmel Priory. The priory was founded around 1189, the same year that Richard the Lionheart became King of England, and it was established for a community of Augustan canons regular. These were religious men who lived together according to a common rule, but whose lives were not entirely separated from the world beyond their walls. They worshipped here, but they also managed the land, received visitors, and served the wider community around them. The first canons are believed to have travelled north from Bradenstoke Priory in Wiltshire. They arrived in what must have then felt like a very remote corner of medieval England, and they began creating something that would shape this valley for centuries. The land on which the priory stood, along with the wider district of Cartmel, was given to the new religious house by its founder. He was not a bishop, he wasn't a king or a wealthy local churchman, but a knight whose life would eventually become one of the most remarkable and thoroughly documented stories of the Middle Ages. Marshal is remembered for tournaments, warfare, loyalty and royal power. He served at the centre of government. He fought in England and France and rose to become one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. Yet here in Cartmel, far removed from the royal courts and tournament fields where his reputation had been made, he created something very different, a religious house dedicated to St Mary the Virgin and St Michael. The priory we see today was not built in a single moment. It grew, it was expanded, it changed and adapted over hundreds of years, and with each generation they added something of their own while retaining much of what had come before. Some of the earliest surviving sections date from the late 12th and early 13th centuries, close to the time of William Marshal himself. While later generations enlarged the church, they repaired it and introduced the architecture of their own age. That is one of the reasons the building feels so alive. While light enters through later windows created for a church that was already centuries old, it never completely dispels the shadows that settle into the stone, and as you move through the building, you begin to feel its age through the different periods of architecture surrounding you. Above the crossing, the tower rises in 2 distinct forms. Its upper stage was added during the 15th century and was placed diagonally across the earlier tower beneath it, creating the unusual shape that now makes Cartmel so immediately recognisable. It is a landmark that can be seen above the village and across the surrounding countryside, drawing the eye back towards the priory from almost every direction. Look more closely and smaller traces of the medieval world begin to emerge. Beneath the choir stalls are carved misericords, small wooden supports decorated with faces, animals and strange creatures, offering brief glimpses into the imaginations of the craftsmen who created them, and reminding us that the medieval world was not quite as uniformly serious as we sometimes imagine. Each generation altered the building, but none completely erased what had existed before. This is the place that has endured, not unchanged, but unbroken. A medieval religious community could not exist on faith alone. William Marshal gave Cartmel that foundation. But to understand how a younger son with little expectation of inheritance acquired such authority, we have to leave this quiet, beautiful valley and enter a very different medieval world. William Marshal is not simply a figure of legend. He's one of the most thoroughly documented knights of the medieval period, and within a decade of his death, an extraordinary account of his life was composed in Anglo-Norman French. It is known as The History of William Marshal, and extends to almost 19,000 lines. It drew upon the memories of people who had known him, served alongside him, and witnessed many of the events it describes. Like any medieval biography, particularly one commissioned by the subject's family, it has to be treated with a certain amount of caution. It presents Marshal as an ideal of knighthood, and naturally seeks to celebrate his achievements and protect his reputation. It also preserves an extraordinary amount of detail about his experiences, his relationships, and even the final weeks of his life. It allows his story to be followed with a clarity that is extremely rare for somebody born in the 12th century. In surviving documents, he appears as William Marshal, his name written beside those of kings, bishops, and powerful noblemen. William witnessed charters, entered agreements, commanded armies, and participated in decisions that shaped the kingdom itself. His life was certainly celebrated after his death, and parts of his story grew into legend, but the man behind that legend was real, and his rise was anything but guaranteed. In part 2, we'll follow the man he became, from the tournament fields and the service of kings, to a journey that would take him all the way to the Holy Land. We'll look at the connection to the Knights Templar, the battles and political struggles that eventually placed the future of England in his hands, but beyond the titles, the victories and the legend that grew around him, I want to try and answer a much more difficult question. Who was the real William Marshal?